Shout out to the Wurundjeri, Bunurong, Taungurung, Jadurung and Wadurung peoples of the Kulin Nation and their elders past and present. Thank you for having me here today. My name's Catherine Stiles and I work in the digital space of the National Portrait Gallery of Australia and the National Museum of Australia. But I'm here under my own steam, which is great because it gives me an opportunity to talk about the big picture and some independent work I've been doing for several years now. Here's the too long didn't listen version of my talk in 3 parts. Firstly, from the outset, museums were agents of imperialist divide and conquer. It's up to us to convert them into double agents of reconciliation. Secondly, the concept of likeness is very important. There are dozens of different words for it, and that's an indication. Likeness unifies without denying difference, which is why shifting focus from individual collection items to pairs of items that might be alike is a counter-hegemonic act. And if you think play is trivial, you're wrong. Play is embodied cognition, and playful associating can change the world. I want to begin with the big picture. Ultimately, the purpose of museums is to provide the space and means for people to reflect on the world. And to clarify that, when I say reflect on the world, I mean to include the part played by human perception, which in turn includes the messy business of bodies, because without our perception of it, there is no world to know. The world is out there, and museums endeavour to capture it, but actually the only real world we have is the one inside ourselves. So to be precise, the ultimate purpose of museums is to provide space and means for people to reflect on both the world and our perception of it. And that's why art museums are just as important as science and history museums. To talk about playfulness as a disruption to sense-making, I need to first talk about how museums know and how that way of knowing came into being. As you know, before there were museums, there were cabinets of curiosity, and they were all about wonder and awe and imagination of the collector and his private audiences alike. Cabinets of curiosity emerged in a transitional space, no longer ruled by theology, but not yet ruled by science. Like cabinets of curiosity, museums comprise collections, but they're otherwise very different. Museums grew in tandem with science. From the outset, they were orderly, rational, and disciplined in their approach and in their intended effect on visitors. Museums function in an intellectual register. They're all about definitive knowledge, so they obscure the imaginary, the speculative, the symbolic, and the puzzling, the mysterious, and the unknown. They obscure, in fact, the very role of the body and perception in knowing about the world. They take the perspective of those privileged to work in museums and they conflate that with the real world. For Indigenous peoples, museums literally orchestrated the imperialist project of dispossession, collecting material culture as well as human remains and displaying both for the edification of non-Indigenous visitors. And I know you know that, but it's really important to recognise that's the legacy that we museum professionals have inherited and which we continue to deal with, usually quietly. Museums no longer propagate the belief that white people are superior, but we're still seduced by the idea that disembodied cognition is possible and preferable, so we still favour diligent, rational research as a means of producing knowledge and tend to downplay incidental, intuitive, experiential and cultural knowledge. But the times are changing, and Wikipedia is an amazing case in point because it's changing the process of authorization, how knowledge is produced, but also, importantly, how it's approved, and that is to say, transparently, with open discussion and version control and procedures for dispute resolution. In other words, with absolute consciousness of the role of perception and its variability in sense-making. And play is emerging as a mode of thought. One way in which museums are propagating the playful mode is through new collection interfaces, which are transforming how people interact with collections. 6 years ago, Mitchell Whitelaw, who's a digital artist and academic at the University of Canberra, won a grant from the National Archives of Australia to make a new experimental interface to the whole collection, and that's 65,000 series of Commonwealth Government records. This is the live version of the archives interface to those 65,000 series. There's no button here for just show me. You have to search for something. So unless you already know what's in there, you're effectively barred from entry. And here is a vastly different interface that Mitchell designed. It allows you to browse casually to gain familiarity with the collection on your own terms. As you move the mouse around, you get information about each box, its shelf space, the number of items it contains, the name of the controlling agency. You can figure out that a big box means a bigger series, so this one is World War I service records. When you click, relationships appear. Here you can see the series of alien registration documents. Aliens here meaning international residents, not interplanetary ones. You can see that this series is linked to all these smaller series, which are about medical examinations. So you can intuit that registered aliens were required to undergo medical examinations. You can use this kind of interface to search and analyse, but you can also use it in a way that the standard search screen prohibits, which is to gain a sense of the whole and to explore, making incidental and intuitive discoveries. So it's playful not because it's not serious, but in the sense that it invites an undisciplined and very aesthetic encounter with the collection. It respects human sensuality in ways that those frigid search boxes don't. Tim Sherratt is another Canberra-based maker of alternative interfaces to collections. His Future of the Past presents a set of significant terms appearing in newspaper articles that also contain the word future. It's kind of like a digital chatterbox where you make a couple of choices and then read the results. So this being the results, it displays the article in which your selected word appeared, but you can also drag and drop your favourite words into the box at the bottom and tweet out a data poem such as "Ritualistic winds valve, cheers Mr. Barton, tippling water." It's absurd, but it's also very evocative of history. Then there's Tim's vintage Face Depot Twitter bot. You send it a photographic face and it tweets back a same but different image where your original face is overlaid with a face from a newspaper. It's a little eerie and quite delightful because the partial transparency effectively morphs one face into the other, so you and this other person become one. And the tweet includes a link to the original image, so I was able to read about Miss Muriel Worth, equestrienne with the Worth Circus. These are playthings, but don't mistake them for trivial. That Twitter bot got me reading a 1901 newspaper article, sharing the tweet, therefore amplifying my interest, but it also gave me an uncanny sense of personal connection to a historical figure. It's working in a register that feels respectful of my humanity and of hers. The Dutch historian and philosopher Johan Huizinga said that play nurtures and sustains civilization itself. What's peculiar about this historical moment is not that we can make a case for play as a mode of thought, it's that we need to. We need to make a case for play as a mode of thought because we're so habituated to the deliberative, disciplinary mode of studying the isolated parts. Intuitively, we know that insights emerge when we recognise interconnectedness. And quantum physics has proven that everything is connected. But in museums and in academia, we continue to privilege the mechanistic mode of knowledge production, which is why I was pleased to read this from a museum director. As collectors of individual objects and artworks and specimens, museums have a tendency to fetishize isolated objects, and that tendency detracts from our ability to make sense of the world. The fact that interconnectivity is important and valuable is also evident in the number of words we have to describe the closeness between things. This is just a sample. What if we invited our online audiences to consider pairs of collection items rather than individual objects? How might it help us to understand complex objects like this one? This is a metal breastplate inscribed with the title, Timothy, Chief of Merricombean. It was made by a white settler for an Aboriginal man to be worn on his chest. And this is a branding iron. They're both objects in the National Museum of Australia. What they have in common is they both inscribe names on bodies. This resemblance reminds us that white settlers imposed a regime of authority onto Aboriginal people. It's a simple connection, but it shifts our perception of the breastplate as an honour bestowed, and it allows us to see it as something darker and more complex. We're alerted to the power of language to assert identity and ownership, and we're nudged to recall that colonists tended to regard Indigenous people as animal-like. So, here, to explore similarity is to recognise difference, starkly, but also gently, palatably. In the last few years, I've been working on a web-based game hinging on the principle that by seeking similarities, we find surprising insights and alter our perception of the world. And recall here the purpose of museums, to enable people to reflect on the world and our perception of it. To playsemble is to exercise your natural faculty of pattern recognition, or analogy making, which is at the very centre of the cognitive process to associate. We're yet to effectively train machines to do it, but for humans, pattern recognition is effortless. We find associations while we're asleep and dreaming, and when we're awake but allowing our minds to wander. It's when we start thinking consciously that it becomes difficult. Our preference for logical, analytical modes of cognition interferes with our natural ability to wildly associate. Curiously, there's a perfect resonance between this call for attention to connectivity or to hidden similarities and the process of sense-making in pre-modern societies. In his book The Order of Things, Foucault accounts for the epistemic shift that occurred around the 17th century, precisely in terms of resemblance. He describes resemblance as the fundamental experience and primary form of knowledge. Being Foucault, of course, as well as saying it straight out, he said it in a much more elaborate and nuanced and loopy way. So in the 17th century, in museums and the culture that nurtured them, discrimination, division, separation, and individualism emerged as the dominant modes of inquiry. Binary logic gave us computers, so I'm not dissing it. And science is kind of brilliant, but knowledge gained through deliberative study is by no means unproblematic. And let's acknowledge the value of play as a mode of thought and a path to sense-making. Museums are invaluable sites for making sense of the world and our experience of it. But unless the experience of visiting is playful, many people will never want to know. Play is powerful. Associative play is our ticket to the future. I'd love to hear your thoughts on play, especially associative play, because I believe this is absolutely core business for museums. And please do drop into my Semble demo on Thursday morning and make a move or two. Thanks.